The ice in Alistair Sterling's scotch clinked with a rhythmic, lonely sound. Around him, Leclerc hummed with the discreet murmurs of the elite, the scent of expensive truffles and aged oak hanging heavy in the air. For Alistair, this was just another Tuesday, another obligation, another blind date arranged by his sister, who insisted he was withering away in his glass tower. He didn't look up when the chair across from him pulled back. He didn't look up when the waiter poured water. He was busy checking a merger update on his phone, until a soft, steady voice cut through his digital haze. "You're late, Alistair. Or perhaps you're just exactly where you always intended to be. 10 years later and still looking at a screen instead of the world." Alistair froze. The voice was like a ghost, a frequency he hadn't heard in a decade, yet it vibrated in his marrow. He slowly looked up. The woman sitting across from him wasn't wearing diamonds. She wore a simple, silk emerald dress that matched the startling clarity of her eyes. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a face that had aged into a breathtaking, quiet grace. "I'm sorry," Alistair said, his CEO mask firmly in place. "Do I know you?" The woman didn't flinch. She didn't look hurt. She simply leaned forward, the candlelight dancing in her pupils, and whispered the words that would dismantle his entire world. "You left me at a bus station, in a rainstorm without saying goodbye, and now you don't even remember my name." Alistair Sterling was a man who dealt in facts, figures, and acquisitions. He had a photographic memory for contracts. Yet as he stared at the woman across from him, his mind was a terrifying blank slate. "I believe there's been a mistake," Alistair said, his voice dropping an octave. "My sister set this up. You're supposed to be Elena, a consultant from London." The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My name is Alara Moon, and your sister didn't set this up, Alistair. I did. I told her I was a consultant because it was the only way to get 30 minutes of your time without being vetted by 3 layers of secretaries." Alistair felt a surge of irritation, the familiar defense mechanism of a powerful man. "If this is a shakedown or some play for a settlement—" "I don't want your money," Ilara interrupted calmly. "I have my own. I have a life that is full and quiet and remarkably free of the greed that defines yours. I'm here because I'm leaving the country in 3 weeks, and I realized I couldn't go without seeing if the man I once loved had any soul left, or if it was all traded for the sterling global ticker symbol." Alistair leaned back, his heart hammering against his ribs, a sensation he hadn't felt since his first IPO Ilara Moon. The name flickered like a dying light bulb in the back of his mind. "We were kids," he managed to say, though he wasn't sure if it was a memory or a guess. "We were 22, she corrected. "We had a plan. A small apartment in the city, your internship, my botanical research. You told me you'd be back by 6. You never came back at all. You sent a courier 2 days later to pick up your bags. Not even a phone call. Just a man in a suit with a clipboard." Alistair's phone vibrated on the table. A high-stakes call from Singapore. Usually, he would take it without hesitation. Today, he stared at the flashing light like it was an intruder. He reached out and flipped the phone face down. "Ilara," he said, the name feeling heavy on his tongue. I don't have an excuse that will satisfy you." "I'm not looking for an excuse," Ilara said, standing up. She hadn't even touched her water. "I was looking for a reaction. I wanted to see if you were still in there, but all I see is a very expensive suit sitting in a very expensive chair, wondering how long this inconvenience will take." "Wait," Alistair said, reaching out to catch her wrist, then pulling back before he made contact. "Sit down, please." She paused, looking at him with a clinical sort of curiosity. "Why?" "Because," Alistair said, his voice cracking slightly, "I genuinely don't remember the bus station. and that scares me more than anything you could say to me." The dinner did not continue at Leclerc. Elara refused to speak in a place where the wine cost more than a month's rent in their old neighborhood. Instead, she led him, the man who usually traveled by private car, to a small, dimly lit park overlooking the river. "This is where you told me you'd buy me a greenhouse one day," Elara said, leaning against the iron railing. Alistair looked at the murky water. The memories were starting to leak through the cracks in his armor. A cramped studio, the smell of jasmine and old books, a blue sweater with a hole in the elbow. "I was hungry," Alistair said suddenly. "Not for food, for everything. My father died that year, Elara. He died with nothing but debts and a name people laughed at. I swore I would never let anyone laugh at the Sterling name again." "So you buried the boy who loved poetry and plants," Elara said softly. "And you buried the girl who loved him along with it." "I had to become someone else to survive," Alistair defended. "No," Elara countered, turning to face him. "You had to become someone else to win. There's a difference. Survival is about staying alive. Winning is about making sure everyone else loses." "You won, Alistair. Look at you. You're the king of the world. Are you happy?" Alistair opened his mouth to give his standard interview answer. Success is its own reward. But the words died in his throat. He looked at Elara's face, the way she didn't need his approval, the way she seemed so grounded in her own skin, and felt a hollow ache in his chest that no acquisition could fill. "I don't know what happy feels like," he admitted. "I know what satisfied feels like for about 10 minutes after a deal closes. Then it's just noise." His phone chirped again. A text from his COO market's opening in Tokyo. "We need a decision on the tech merger." Elara glanced at the glowing screen. "The noise is calling, Alistair. You should go. I've said what I needed to say." "No," Alistair said, more forcefully than intended. "You said you're leaving in 3 weeks. Where?" "Japan," she said. "A 3-year research project on alpine flora. I've spent my life studying things that grow in the harshest conditions. Maybe that's why I was so drawn to you." "Stay for coffee," he pleaded. "Tomorrow. Not a date, not a business meeting. Just talk to me. Help me remember who that boy was." Elara looked at him for a long time. The wind whipped her hair across her face. "I'm not a tour guide for your lost soul, Alistair. If you want to remember, you have to do the work yourself." She turned and began to walk away into the darkness of the park. "Elara!" he called out. She stopped but didn't turn around. "What was the last thing I said to you?" "Before the bus station." There was a long silence. The city hummed around them. "You told me," she said, her voice trembling for the first time, "that you'd be right back. You told me to wait. And I did, Alistair. I waited for a very long time." Alistair didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse, surrounded by minimalist art and floor-to-ceiling glass, and felt like a prisoner. He pulled out an old box from the back of his closet, a box he hadn't opened in a decade. Inside were letters, unopened. They were addressed to him at his first office, dated months after he'd left Elara. He'd told his assistant back then to handle the personal clutter. He realized now that he had outsourced his own heart. He opened the first letter. "Alistair, I saw your name in the paper today. You look different in a suit. Your eyes look colder. I hope you're eating. I hope you found what you were looking for." He opened the second. "I'm moving out of the apartment. I can't keep seeing your shadow in the hallway. I don't hate you, Alistair. I just wish I knew why I wasn't worth a goodbye." He read every single one until the sun rose over the skyline. By 7 a.m., his office was calling. By 8 a.m., he was in a boardroom. But, for the first time in his career, he wasn't the smartest man in the room. He was distracted. "Mr. Sterling," The valuation is at 40 billion. Do we sign? Alistair looked at the contract. 40 billion. It was a number that could change the world. But all he could think about was a bus station in the rain. I need to go, Alistair said, standing up. Sir? The board can wait, Alistair snapped. The world isn't going to stop spinning if we wait 24 hours to buy another company. He walked out, leaving his executives in stunned silence. He drove himself, something he rarely did, to the address he'd found in a recent directory for Moon's Botanical. It wasn't a corporate office. It was a small, vibrant nursery on the edge of the city. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming lilies. He found Alara in the back, wearing an apron, her hands covered in soil as she repotted a delicate fern. She didn't look surprised to see him. You're early, she said, not looking up. Or perhaps you're 10 years late. It depends on your perspective. I read the letters, Alistair said, his voice raw. Alara paused, her fingers stilled in the dirt. I thought you'd burned them. I didn't even know they existed until last night. I was a coward, Alara. I didn't want to look back, because I knew if I saw what I'd left behind, I wouldn't have the strength to keep going. So you chose the money over the person, she said, finally looking up. That's a common story in this city. It wasn't about the money. It was about the power to never be hurt again, he said. But standing in that boardroom today, I realized I've never been more vulnerable. I'm a man with everything and nothing. Alara wiped her hands on her apron and stepped toward him. Why are you really here, Alistair? Is this about guilt? Because I don't need your apologies to move on with my life. I moved on a long time ago. I want to show you that I haven't forgotten everything, he said. I want to spend these last 3 weeks reminding you and myself that I'm still the person who loved poetry and plants. Alara looked at him, searching his face for the lie. 3 weeks, Alistair. No business calls, no secretaries, no Sterling Global, just you. Can you even do that? I'll try, he promised. Trying isn't enough, she said. In my world, if you don't tend to a plant every day, it dies. Love is the same way. You let us die. Why should I let you back in now? The next 2 weeks were a study in contrast. Alistair Sterling, the man who dined with heads of state, was now spending his afternoons hauling bags of mulch and learning the difference between a perennial and an annual. He stayed true to his word. He left his phone in the car. At first, the silence was deafening. He felt an itch in his palms to check the markets, to see his emails. But then slowly, the noise began to fade. He began to notice things. The way Alara hummed when she worked. The way she spoke to the plants as if they were old friends. The way the light hit her face at 4 p.m. One evening, after the nursery had closed, they sat on the back porch of her small cottage, drinking tea. Do you remember the night it started snowing in October? Alistair asked. We didn't have heat in that apartment yet. We wrapped ourselves in every blanket we owned and read The Odyssey out loud. Alara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made Alistair's heart ache. You fell asleep during the part where Odysseus finally gets home. I stayed awake and watched the snow. I remember thinking that as long as I was in that room with you, I was home. The atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy with the things they hadn't said. Alistair reached out, his hand hovering near hers. I never found home again, he whispered. I found houses, I found estates, but never home. Alara didn't pull away, but she didn't take his hand either. You can't go back, Alistair. You can only go forward, and my forward is 6,000 miles away. Come with me to the gallery tonight, Alistair said. There's an exhibition. No press, just us. There's something I want to show you. Alistair, please. One night of the life I built. but seen through your eyes." She agreed, but the night took a turn Alistair didn't expect. As they walked through the private gallery, a group of investors recognized him. They swarmed, talking about stock prices, hostile takeovers, and the brilliant way Alistair had crushed a competitor the week before. Alistair tried to deflect, but he could see Alara backing away. She saw the version of him that the world knew, the predator, the shark. When they were finally alone in the car, the silence was cold. "That's who you are," Alara said quietly. "They admire you for your cruelty, Alistair. They think it's brilliant that you destroyed a family-run business to get their patents." "That was business, Alara. It wasn't personal." "It's always personal," she cried out. "To the people losing their livelihoods, it's personal. To the girl you left at a bus station, it was personal. You haven't changed. You've just learned how to play a new part for 3 weeks." "That's not fair," Alistair snapped, his old temper flaring. "I've given you everything these last 2 weeks. I've ignored my responsibilities." "Responsibilities?" She laughed bitterly. "You mean your hoard of gold." "Goodbye, Alistair. I think it's better if we don't see each other before I leave." "Alara, wait!" But she was already out of the car. Alistair watched her go, the tail lights of his luxury sedan reflecting in the puddles on the street. He had 3 days until she left for Japan. And he had just proven her right. Alistair went back to his penthouse, but the walls felt like they were closing in. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He saw the man the investors admired. He saw the man who had won, and for the first time, he hated him. He picked up a crystal vase, a gift from a foreign dignitary, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't call his lawyer. He called his sister. "Tell me the truth," he said when she picked up. "Why did you really agree to help Alara find me?" His sister sighed on the other end. "Because, Alistair, you've been a ghost for 10 years. You're successful, yes, but you're empty. Alara was the only thing that ever made you real. I thought if you saw her, you might find your way back to the person you were before Dad died." "She thinks I'm a monster," Alistair said. "Are you?" his sister asked. "Only you can decide that. But remember, Alistair, you can't buy forgiveness. You have to earn it." Alistair spent the next 48 hours doing something he had never done. He began to divest. He stepped down as CEO of Sterling Global, appointing his capable COO. He set up a foundation to restore the neighborhoods his developments had displaced. He didn't do it for the press. In fact, he kept it quiet. He did it because he couldn't stand the weight of the gold anymore. On the final night before Alara's flight, he didn't send a car. He didn't send flowers. He walked to her cottage. He knocked on the door. When she opened it, she was surrounded by packed boxes. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed. "I told you not to come," she said. "I'm not here as the CEO of Sterling Global," he said. "I'm here as Alistair, just Alistair. I resigned today." Alara's jaw dropped. "You did what?" "I realized I can't keep building a kingdom I don't want to live in," he said. "I've spent the last 2 days trying to fix some of the things I broke. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's a start." He held out a small, battered book. It was the copy of the Odyssey they had read together. "I went back to our old apartment building," he said. "The new tenant was going to throw it out. I bought it from him for $100. Alara took the book, her fingers trembling as she touched the worn cover. "I'm still leaving, Alistair," she whispered. "I have to. This project, it's my dream." "I know," he said, "and I want you to go. I want you to have everything you ever dreamed of. I wanted to say goodbye this time, properly." He stepped closer, the scent of jasmine from her garden wrapping around them. I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking you to remember that I'm trying. And when you come back, if you come back, maybe there will be a version of me worth waiting for." Ilara looked up at him, and for the first time in 10 years, the distance between them vanished. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his chest. Alistair wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if she were the only anchor in a storm. "You left me without a goodbye," she breathed into his coat. "I'll never leave you again," he promised, "even if we're on different sides of the world." The airport was cold and sterile. Ilara stood at the gate, her carry-on bag at her side. Alistair was there, standing at the edge of the security line. "3 years is a long time," she said. "I've waited 10 years to find you again," Alistair replied. 3 years is nothing. Will you really change, Alistair? Or will the noise come back the moment I'm gone? Alistair reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, plain wooden box. Inside was a single, dried flower, the one he had helped her pot on his first day at the nursery. "This is my reminder," he said. "Every day I spend rebuilding my life, I'll look at this. It's a reminder that the most beautiful things take time, patience, and the right environment to grow. I'm going to build that environment, Ilara. Not for a company, for us." The intercom announced the final boarding call. Ilara looked at the gate, then back at Alistair. She stepped forward and kissed him, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted of salt and hope. "Don't send me letters, Alistair," she said, pulling away. "Don't send me gifts." He looked hurt. "Then how?" "Send me yourself," she said. "When you're ready. When the man I loved is fully back. Come to Japan and find me." She turned and walked down the jet bridge, not looking back. Alistair stood there until the plane took off, a silver streak against the gray morning sky. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't the hollow ache of the billionaire. It was the sharp, stinging pain of a heart that had finally started beating again. He walked out of the airport, ignored the black town car waiting for him, and started walking. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but for the first time in a decade, he knew exactly who he was. He was a man who had been given a second chance. And this time, he wouldn't let the world get in the way of the goodbye or the hello that mattered. As the sun broke through the clouds, Alistair Sterling smiled. The billionaire was gone. The boy who loved plants was finally, slowly, making his way home.